That's always the way it goes.
Hi, Cindy. Can you hear me? Okay, you're still muted. Your microphone for right now. There you go. Oh, or no, that's someone else coming in. In the lower left-hand corner. I can hear you now. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can certainly stay muted during the discussion here.
You bet.
But I just wanted to say hi.
Hi. Hi from Illinois.
You're from Illinois? Excellent.
I'm in Illinois right now. I'm from Las Vegas.
Ah, okay. What takes you to Illinois?
Visiting my mom.
Oh, excellent, excellent. All right, so.
Hello, ladies.
Hello.
I've been here the whole time, just sort of traipsing out here in the background.
Gotcha.
Type an email.
Yes.
I was looking at the Southeastern GSA meeting coming up. I know you're in Illinois, Cindy, you said? So.
I'm visiting Illinois. I live in Las Vegas.
Oh, well, yeah, so Southeastern's even less important than thinking about how I could get a student research technical session, perhaps, as a poster session. I've never convened one before, so checking it out.
Hi, Shelley. Yeah, she's not on yet.
Hi, here I am.
Hello, hello.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, well, for me, it's still morning, 11:49.
Yeah.
Gosh, I wonder if I can change my name on this thing from Sage2IC to my actual name.
To Russ.
We could just put you over in the, I can say here in the chat, Sage 2IC equals Russ scores.
Did you write it as an equation, I hope? Oh, nice. Sweet. You to throw a variable in there. We can get a slope.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to, I can't be creative at this point.
No, that's fine.
We've reached that mental capacity overload point for me in the
Been one of those
transitioning time.
Yeah, it's been one of those days for me, for sure. Difficult student matter earlier, and yeah. But we're here.
Hey, Russ, before we get started, I wanted to tell you about a success that I had very late last night. This goes back to the Giga Macro and embedding GigaPans into Canvas.
Yeah.
So I went back and watched your little video on that because I needed to make a quiz pretty quickly. And so when I bring the GigaPans over into Giga Macro, that allows me to also change the metadata.
Yes.
So yeah, so because my big problem with like the HTML code and so forth was that I couldn't get the information, like if it says granite and I want to use it as a quiz question. I couldn't get the metadata out of there.
Right, okay.
So, so doing it the Giga Macro way, and I mean, it takes a few steps, but it's easy to embed then in the Canvas, and I can get rid of the metadata. So, you know, I can use anything, which is for a quiz question, which is really great.
Well, one of the things I'm curious about actually, and I think Callan is the person to talk to about this, at least at first, is, you know, if somebody creates a GigaPan image, say not for educational purposes, but a beautiful picture from Iceland, and we want to use it, and we embed it into Giga Macro Viewer, how do we deal with the rights on that? And so if we do edit the metadata, is that okay or not?
Right.
So yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
It's probably not okay.
Probably.
And probably when I made those pictures public, that's probably not okay either. But
well, it's an interesting question.
I actually kept the copyright information on
Yeah.
there. I just took like the title off of it, but all of the ones I ended up using were Kellen's magic project anyway, so it really
Yeah.
probably doesn't matter, but.
If you had the original author, photographer's permission,
Yeah.
could you used by permission, and then
Yeah.
could do it.
Yeah,
I haven't altered any metadata on mine because I haven't. I've kind of designed the VFEs I put together to just not have to worry about that. And so when I do, I do go into the metadata and I alternate and I make sure I put the name of the photographer in and the link to gigapan.com.
Oh, you're such a good guy.
Well, it shows up as mine when I import it into the viewer. It's like I didn't take that image, so I don't want anybody to misconstrue that. So
yeah, I can go back and I can definitely go back and do that because it's so easy in Gigamacro to edit those things.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
That viewer's fabulous.
It is. It is. So I just want you to know that I finally got to that yesterday.
Good success. Yeah.
After we took a hike out at Hurricane Ridge with our daughter yesterday afternoon, and then so last night I was working.
Cool.
And got to that, so it's great. I was so excited.
Congratulations. That HTML can be crazy stuff sometimes. Yeah. Well, we still have 8 minutes. Well, we're all here early. Cindy, you were like on the ball here.
After I turned in my grades, so I don't know what to do with myself. I couldn't even take 12 hours off apparently. So
yeah,
I'm still working on grades. So.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
In the next week, yeah. It's like the process of ending a high school. I mean, my primary job is at a special kind of high school, but the process of ending the school year takes a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi guys, I'm Hal. Sorry I don't have a camera going on.
It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I'm teaching out west at Central Oregon Community College. And actually teaching historical geology right now for the first time, and totally not stoked with the textbook I used. So really excited that people are interested in making an OER textbook. I think that's awesome.
Hal, what textbook do you use right now?
Wikander and Monroe's, what is it, The Changing Earth?
Oh yeah, that's the one we've adopted officially years ago. Oof.
That's the combo one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and what really frustrated me, and I don't know the best way around this, but Earth history is presented as just this overwhelming litany of this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Like I got bored reading it and just stopped assigning it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the questions we'll have today is how do we make that better?
Yeah.
I have to keep it in my syllabus officially, but I tell students, please don't buy this. I will give you what you need. So that was part of me personally. That was part of my inspiration to get involved with this project.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one with those feelings.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think that's why we're here, is because there just isn't a there's lots of bits and pieces all over the place that are good, but there's not one location, with everything that you need.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've been finding really overwhelming is there's no shortage of cool stuff out there.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, and especially historical geology is not my forte in any way, so I feel less competent in judging and assessing and being like, yeah, this is good material that I should be using or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely a function that I see of the textbook, is at the very least an organization of available material already.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that, like you're saying, there's so much content, and students often go find that content on their own.
Yep.
But they certainly don't have the ability to necessarily vet that and know what they're looking at. and whether or not it's good. And so if we could create a series of resources in association with this text, I think a lot of folks would find that helpful, just because then we know, like, this is good visualizations of these particular topics or whatever it is we're looking for. So M. Hicks 2, can you tell us your name if you can hear us? I'm thinking perhaps, okay. Hi, Melissa. I'm just making sure that we've got track of, we're keeping track of who's coming today.
Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. So, Cindy, do you also teach at a two-year college?
I do. I teach at the College of Southern Nevada in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Cool.
So this is our two-year college day.
Yeah, I guess so. I did for several years teach at Umpqua in Southern Oregon, so I'm familiar with the Oregon system. But yeah, I teach out of Stanley, which has its, well, you know, it's a mixed bag like everything else. I'm really invested in trying to get my students some cost savings, because students are so strapped for money as it is, and having them buy a lab manual, because I've been trying to use, well, the lab manual is a whole different issue, but trying to have them buy a lab manual and maybe just teach out of my own notes and some online resources so that I can cut their costs in half is what I'm looking for. So.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in the same boat on that. Yesterday we had one of these, and it was our participants, I think, were all four-year college professors, weren't they? Yeah, and so it's good to have. It's interesting to have a different academic demographic, if you would.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I also love today that we've definitely got a nice spread across the country.
No
Yes.
kidding. That's awesome.
Yeah. I still teach for Northern Virginia Community College, but I'm actually located on the Olympic Peninsula. So I moved to Washington last year. So I'm on the West Coast now.
Yeah, I think that geographic spread represents one of the challenges here.
Yeah.
You know, my feeling is like a good Earth history class should really be about the local Earth history, because that's what people are going to find more relevant. But obviously you can't put everybody's local Earth history into a textbook. So that's where, I guess one of the things that I'm seeing is what I really want from the textbook is kind of the universally applicable skills, you know, reading the rocks, reading the paleoclimate, relative dating, absolute dating. And then, you know, Oregon's Earth history, I don't expect to see that in a textbook. I expect to, you know, learn that and then pass that on.
So those of you just checking in here, what we're doing is just kind of introducing ourselves a little bit, telling just kind of where we teach and just how we're doing in historical. So anything that you want to just comment, feel free to do that as we wait for a few more minutes to let us log in. So Kelly, I think you can introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Kelly Trujillo, and I teach at Laramie County Community College, which is in southeastern Wyoming, Cheyenne and Laramie. And I haven't yet taught historical here. We're re-upping the class in ed. So we're rewriting it, and this is perfect timing.
Come in.
Cool. I see it looks windy there.
Yeah, a little bit.
So is it a transferable course for your students, Kelly?
Yeah, it will be, yeah.
Okay.
Still on our, so we don't have to redo it so much, but we're redoing all of our gen eds, and it's one that could count towards both physical and life sciences. And so we think a lot of students will take it. So if we can have an OER book, that makes it even better.
Gotcha. Excellent. Excellent.
All right, I see Darren Carter, who's closing a window shade.
The secret webinar.
Hey guys.
Yeah. So where do you teach, Darren? Where are you?
I'm in Oregon, so I teach at Lynn Benton Community College. and we're right outside of Corvallis, where Oregon State University is. So we're kind of the feeder community college to Oregon State University.
Oh, okay. Great. There's a guy there who studies the big trees. I can't remember his name now at Oregon State. I read his book. It was discovering all the life and the very system, ecosystem within the redwoods and so forth.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Anyway, I can't remember his name. Steve something or other, but interesting stuff. Well, it's 3:01. Karen, Shelley, do you think we're...
Let's go for it.
Okay. Yeah, especially in the interest of time and being respectful of all of your time, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Russ Kors. I am moonlighting here as Sage 2YC. If you look up to the chat, you can see that equation. I teach at Lord Fairfax Community College as an adjunct professor of geology, but my main job is actually at a Virginia Governor's School, so I teach environmental geosciences to dual enrolled high school students primarily. But we're tasked here. We actually have a grant to produce an introductory level textbook, and our team is based here in Virginia. So I'll base in Virginia sort of, because Shelley's not quite in Virginia. So many of you probably know Callan Bentley. He would be with us if he could. He had a family emergency a few days ago, and so we're trying to run the show for him, or in lieu without him. So Shelley and Karen, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'll go first because my mic's still on, and then I'll turn it off. Hi, I'm Karen Layu. I teach at Reynolds Community College in Richmond, Virginia, and I teach primarily physical and historical geology courses. And my background's in paleontology, and that I find both a benefit and a curse to teaching historical, because it lets me teach paleo, but there's so much I can't talk about because we just don't have the time. And so that's one of those constant struggles for me in terms of doing a nice balance of content in historical. Well, you can send it to Mom.
And I'm Shelley J. I'm also teaching full-time, but now full-time online for Northern Virginia Community College. And I'm located now on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. And so I'm doing this all remotely. So also, looking at all of the development for the historical course so that it, is very applicable to an online course as well as, a classroom course.
Yeah, so we, as I said before, we want to develop an introductory level text. The Library of Virginia has generously given us this grant to do this. And we represent people who teach primarily at two-year colleges, but also, as Shelley alluded to, online. I know I teach my courses primarily as hybrid courses, so a little of both, and then on campus as well. So we really want this text to be not only introductory text, and the text that is accessible for non-science majors and hopefully also interesting for science majors. So we want it to be as general in that regard as possible, but also applicable in as many different settings as possible. So we're looking for your feedback, your ideas. The webinar will have really a two-part, well, maybe three-part structure at this point. We're going to talk about content for a while, and what all of you would love to see in a textbook of this sort, of this kind, and then we'll talk about format and what kind of format you think would be best, different kinds of characteristics of that format, and so forth. So it's interesting to hear briefly what you use, and certainly when you think it's relevant, talk about that. So Karen, did you want to add anything about the structure at this point?
Not particularly. I think that, again, basically we're going to talk about the content first, things that we want to see content-wise, and then we'll talk a little bit about format. The biggest thing is everybody just jump in when you want to. Feel free to use the chat window. We're going to be engaging with Melissa from Onondaga Community College over in the chat window. So let's just make sure that, we respect her, and I'll be watching her comments as well. But again, the idea here is that we want to hear your thoughts. So with that, Russ, why don't you go ahead and jump into the first questions?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to be as unbiased with this as possible, because yesterday we had a webinar as well, and I don't want to bring in too many ideas and suggestions from that. I really want to hear as fresh as possible your perspective. So our first discussion point comes right out of the survey. Of those who responded to our survey, 54% of respondents noted that paleontology-related topics were areas they feel most uncomfortable teaching. So I guess the first question is, as far as the folks who are here, does that reflect your perspective, or I was going to get an idea of the group's comfort level with those topics?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Paleontology is extremely unfamiliar to me.
Okay.
And I would say the opposite. Paleo is what my background is mainly.
Okay. So one thought in terms of that, Hal, okay, Melissa says all her degrees are in paleo as well.
Okay.
So Hal, just thinking about paleo topics, is there something specific in paleo that's more or less challenging for you?
Yeah, the logic to looking at fossils. I don't know where to start in terms of teaching my students how to intelligently look at fossils to try to glean information, the way I would if we were looking at sedimentary rocks.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Basics of identification, or is it taking it that step further and thinking about the fossils as tools to indicate paleo environments, species, that sort of thing?
I'd say both.
Okay. Okay.
So for the rest of you, now Darren, did you say you agreed with that?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, Darren?
Yeah. I mean, I feel somewhat comfortable teaching paleo kind of at the, real introductory level. I guess the bigger question is, how does paleo fit into a historical class? Kind of like how does it align with like the outcomes in general of a historical class? Is it identification? Is it changing diversity through time? Is it paleo-environmental interpretation? I mean, probably all of them, right? But
okay, well, yeah, those are good questions. So then I guess I could turn it over to, let's see, Cindy and Kelly and Melissa, yes. So for those of you who are more familiar, more comfortable with paleo, how do you handle it or how would you handle it in historical?
Go ahead and speak. It depends on what my audience is. It turns out in the last few years, my enrollment has doubled in my historical class because the computer science majors at University of Nevada, Las Vegas have aggregated toward my class. So I've got a half of a class of geology majors who are really outdoorsy, tan, bearded, you know what I'm saying? And the other half are pale, computer science majors who never leave their rooms. And so I've included a lot of computer graphics, and reconstructions of fossils lately to help them understand the applications of computer science and paleontology, reconstructing ancient organisms and things like that. But it really depends on who's in the class. If there's more biology majors, I put in more about evolution. So I get a real mixed bag, so I just kind of try to speak to the crowd.
Okay. How do you assess that going into the semester? Is that something you know ahead of the course? Or is that something you kind of find out day one based on a roster?
Well, we're given their enrollment information, and then I poll them during the first week, and then I can tailor it after that, because I'm one of those people who doesn't set up everything exactly at the start of the semester, and I change things a little bit as I go along. So. Gotcha.
Okay. How about you, Kelly?
Well, since I haven't done historical myself yet, guess I would just probably use fossils all the way through, just like what Melissa, I think it is, who just commented there in the chat. Just use them all the way through to show not just here's what life did through time, but paleo-environmental reconstructions and all that kind of stuff that you can get from fossils, trace fossils, and body fossils, and all of that. And in my biology classes and in physical geology, I use fossils quite a bit just because I like them and students like them. So they're kind of a, gateway drug to science.
Yeah, I think that idea that many of us with a paleo background tend to do is try to emphasize how fossils can be tools.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're fun just to learn about because they're fun, i.e. dinosaurs, but you can also get into a lot of interesting questions if you start to think about the fossils as tools for paleoclimate, like Melissa's talking about, or again, more broadly understanding, say, deep marine versus shallow marine environments. And again, it's still at a very introductory level. You can kind of tackle some of that. Okay.
Yeah, so I think one feeling I'm getting is that going in detail what a brachiopod is in their anatomy and everything else is less important than how they fit into perhaps a group of evolutionary fauna or something like that, and what that means for the larger group of systems, or the interconnection of systems. I mean, does that seem more appropriate, folks, then? Or
can I pipe in really quick? I was just looking over our course learning outcomes for historical, and there's kind of two that deal with fossils. And this is just, I teach in a quarter, so 10 historical in 10 weeks, which is, a huge challenge. But let me just, if it's okay, let me just read these off, and, maybe they can also kind of help act as a springboard for ideas. So one of them is recognize how fossils are formed and reconstruct the changing diversity of life on Earth with regard to the faunal assemblages that characterize the geologic eras. And then the other is describe how the Earth systems have changed over time and their consequences for biological evolution.
Ooh.
So those are kind of how I'm approaching it, I guess, in my class, which certainly doesn't mean that that's how everyone has to approach it.
I think those are written with wisdom.
Yes, appropriately vague learning outcomes are always excellent, right?
Okay, so I mean, we had some ideas. Let's see. How about should we get into the basics of evolution, micro versus macro, cladistics, and so forth? These are other, especially cladistics, other tools we use. So I guess things like that are those things that people are interested in potentially using in a class like this as tools to better understand Earth history.
So Melissa, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, because you say you teach evolution and then use the paleo to do environmental change and discussion. But I guess the question we're getting at here is it necessary to have the basics of understanding how we understand the diversity of life, how we sort of understand relationships of the diversity of life? Is that necessary, or do you kind of stay away from that more deep bio dive?
And then to build on that question, as you're typing, Melissa, and as you guys are all thinking about this, I mean, one of the things that has come up and we've discussed in our writing is, how much remedial stuff we need to get into in terms of remedial biology. For a lot of our students, we know, are coming in with their best biology, or the latest biology was perhaps 9th or 10th grade. If they've had a biology course in college, we're lucky, especially for the non-science majors. So thoughts on that? I mean, how much remedial material would you like to see in a book like this?
That was one of my biggest frustrations with Mokander and Monroe's The Changing Earth, is they very much assumed that you already knew bio. I mean, the terminology in that was difficult for me to follow. And full disclosure, I haven't taken college biology. So I think we need to be careful about whatever sort of bio stuff we put in there, because it does need to be accessible to people with essentially no background. That would be my 2 cents.
Okay, that's helpful.
Melissa or Kelly, or what do you have some thoughts on that at all? Your background?
Just thinking about students in physical geology, when I teach that, I often have students who have already taken general bio with me that then take physical, and don't really notice when we do the fossil parts. I guess I must not cover things that are unknown to them, I guess. I've not really run across having issues when we just do the fossil part of physical and having students have problems with it. So this is a new idea, a new thing to think about for me.
Yeah.
With historical, that would be they would be students just coming in with no expectations other than they've had at least developmental English and math, and that's about it. So there are ways to get into taxonomy and evolution and all of that without wading in too deep into the biology. That's, yeah.
Okay. That's helpful.
I have some in there though.
One thing I guess I would like to ask everyone is how is your, if you're teaching historical or any of the other geology courses, how is your lecture and lab split? We had kind of different approaches yesterday in our webinar that we heard about. Do you see, I guess the question first of all is do you see the same students for lecture and lab? Or are your students, like you could have students for lecture that take lab with somebody completely different, and so that would be helpful in understanding.
Well, for me, I take it all together.
Okay, so
only
yeah.
one who does any of it. So yeah, but I also do hybrid classes. So labs once a week, and then everything else online.
Everything else online. Okay. How about you, Cindy?
I teach the lectures 3 hours a week, and then usually I used to teach the labs, but when our enrollment increased, I had to hire a part-timer to teach labs. And it's great being in a university town because I've got a graduate student from UNLV that we hire on, and he's younger and excited, and you know he's doing a great job. But yeah, they meet with him, but he and I work closely together to try to match the curriculum.
Okay.
Okay.
Darren, what about you?
Yeah, I teach an integrated lab lecture
Okay.
section. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's same, sorry.
No, you go ahead. Al. Same thing for you?
Yeah, same here, integrated.
Well, good. That's actually,
Okay.
that's I've heard that more than anything else, the integrated way of doing things. But we have had some interesting, like Melissa here just mentioned that she has the same students for lab and lecture, but not all the students take the lab.
Oh.
Which I found very interesting.
Sadness.
Oh, so that's like a 3-hour lecture and a 1-hour lab, and they don't have to take the lab then.
Yeah, very intriguing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess my question stems from how much overlap there is. You know, if you're not teaching the same, if you're not teaching integrated and you're not teaching the same students, how much overlap between lecture and lab is there, or is it mutually exclusive? Because in some, you know, some methods of teaching, you know, as we're talking about the paleo, is that the lecture covers the environment, and then, you know, all the identification and so forth is just left for the lab component. So yeah, so we're thinking about that too. You know, we could we really don't want to turn this into a textbook and lab book combined, but we would like to ultimately have a companion open lab book as well.
Well, and like the skill part of things, I mean, that skill part of things doesn't always come out in lecture as much as it does in lab activities. So we're making sure we're working on that also. we'll get to that more in a second, of course. But I guess one of our other questions and other discussion points was the march through time, as we sometimes call it. We've heard in the survey most people appreciate not doing the march through time, but rather emphasizing big moments or case studies we've heard or various sorts of things like that. And so kind of want to get your all's perspective on how you feel about the march through time, so to speak, versus other ways of doing it. So how would you like to see such a thing structured, such a text structured in terms of that kind of content?
Yeah, I agree. I hate the march through time. I like that idea of doing case studies or big moments. You know, obviously the mass extinctions are a blast to teach. Everyone gets excited by those. I'm not sure exactly how you decide which ones. Yeah.
Well, let's put that. So what are your top 5 moments in time? And don't just list all 5 all 5 mass.
Yeah, we started doing this ourselves and ended up as a march through time. But that would be helpful to hear, like, you know, if we say historical geology, what are the most important things that have happened? You know, what are the top 5 things that you think have to be in there and discussed in, you know, a certain amount of detail? What do you think? So mass extinctions is one. What things that come to my mind are like, you know, the great oxidation event, you know, the different mass continents through time.
For me, I really think going to like prokaryote to eukaryote transitions, or even some of the major diversifications from shelly taxa to and invertebrates to vertebrates, tiktaalik.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cindy, I might have interrupted you.
That's okay. You know, sea level curves, glaciations, you know, oscillations in climate, you know, the Paleogene superheating event, you know, compared to the, you know, snowball Earth, that kind of thing should figure pretty prominently.
Yeah.
Melissa's saying Grenville Sauk Cambrian explosion, mass extinctions, Pangea formation, ice ages, snowball Pleistocene, water to land transition for organisms. So this brings, you know, so here's a thing. So one suggestion we had, and this has been a few weeks ago now at a meeting in person, was so you have these big moments in time. So how do you tie them together, or do you tie them together under sort of an aegis or a theme? One suggestion was using climate as a theme, especially how prescient that topic is today. Or I mean, we could think of any number of other themes, or just focusing on systems and system interactions in general. So what are your thoughts on that? Because if it becomes a march through time, okay, but maybe there's a way to make that march through time a little more interesting and applicable. What do you think?
I would go with climate. Yeah. I mean, my first thought was, you know, doing your Earth systems approach, your atmosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere, geosphere. So basically atmosphere is climate, and that one, everything is influencing that. So it's a nice way to tie it all together. And it does give you kind of one common thread that you can constantly be checking back in with. And yeah, obviously it's relevant.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think climate would be wonderful to do. It'd be really useful.
So one thought is, if you're going with a climate focus, what particular climate events are key? And Darren, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, just maybe another way of looking at it. So in our curriculum, in the curriculum at Oregon State, this is kind of the one course that deals with kind of biosphere. So I like the theme of how life has affected Earth and how Earth has affected life over time, and certainly climate. I mean, carbon cycle. So to me, that kind of that having that biosphere component is important. Just within our curriculum, though. But again, there's no upper division paleontology class that our majors are going to take too. So that might be unique to other programs too.
The biosphere geosphere struggle through time.
So, Darren, just real quick, is yours one of the community colleges where students can actually major in geosciences or geology?
They can. We do have an associate's degree. We're so close to the university that virtually no one gets one. They're going to go on to Oregon State and get their bachelor's in geology. So it's basically you can do your first 2 years, which is here it's a year of geology. So we split physical, we're in quarters, physical over 2 terms, and then historical is 1 10-week term.
Okay. So.
10 weeks historical is brutal. It's just brutal. I'm so sorry that has to happen. Yeah.
So we're kind of getting close to the point, Russ, where we might want to shift to the other discussion. But just to kind of summarize, it sounds like a lot of what we're hearing is this more systems approach is kind of a way to think about it, rather than that march through time, but maybe emphasize interactions between systems. And then potentially see if we can focus more on case studies rather than like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events.
Sounds great.
Okay. So then we'll switch gears a little bit and focus on format. So I guess the first question would be related to how do you use a text in your course? Do you assign readings? Is it just a reference? Of course, this may be entirely dependent upon how well you like the book you have, and so forth, or how accessible it is. So let's hear from you all first, and how you would typically use your texts.
I usually assign a chapter, and then we'll have some sort of questions that have to be answered to ensure that it actually gets done. So I would say I try to integrate it pretty tightly.
So are those questions being asked, like, say, online, or is it in class? Is it something they have to do as homework?
As homework, and then we'll go over them in class.
Okay.
So certainly that's where I appreciate it when textbooks have well-written review questions, because that just makes my life a little easier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I should mention our inspiration for this project, at least something we're trying to, on some level, replicate, but also kind of house with is the physical geology text at opengeology.org, right? That was developed by the folks at Salt Lake Community College. We're in touch with them on this and talking about how they did it and all that kind of good stuff. We have some other ideas of things to augment ours that will be different than theirs, but we're thinking about housing it in the same place, or even as a part of that text. So if you're familiar with that one, that's kind of the direction on some level we're headed. Let's hear from the rest of you guys. How do you use your texts?
So Melissa just posted that she doesn't use a text but gives readings from various papers with review questions, and then a 25 fossils book by Prothero. And so a question that I have for Melissa is, are any of those peer-reviewed articles? Like, are you sending them to primary literature, or are you using more pop science texts?
Because one of the things we've talked about is whether we provide some resources or links to seminal papers, things of that nature that professors or instructors might want to use to augment their text or their teaching.
That would be really cool. We just read first the New Yorker article, "The Day the Dinosaurs Died," and then the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And basically, I realized the peer-reviewed stuff I felt like we had to do in class so they could have help with it. But just having those the seminal case studies, as you were just saying, available would be tremendously helpful. Because again, that's a field I don't know what the good papers are. So that would be really cool.
A lot of primary literature when I'm talking about local or regional geologic studies, so that one of their course outcomes is that they write a field report. So I take them to the Grand Canyon and they write a paper on that. So they have to use the primary literature for that.
Why not?
Yeah, it's the best laboratory in the world. So
Yeah, that's rough.
Absolutely. Yes.
literature is important because they get so little of that in other courses, and it's science literacy that everybody reads something from the primary literature, and I totally support that in this textbook.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so how about an OER? Anybody use any OER materials currently?
Yeah, I use the Salt Lake one, the Utah.
Okay, how do you use it? I'm using it now for the first time, so.
For physical, I use it, and that's for a hybrid. Geology. I just did hybrid this semester for the first time, and it was the second semester using that book, and I like it a lot. I think it's really good. The students comment that they love the links in it, where they can click on it and pull up a video or whatever, and then the questions that are in it, I actually transfer those into Canvas and have them answer those, do it in the book, and then transfer it into Canvas to get points for it.
Oh, that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah. Then I don't have to write the questions. I can choose the ones that I like from them, and then the students can actually say, "Oh, I was wrong," and then go back and figure it out. And so they're learning as they're doing it, hopefully. So, but I just use it as straight up, read this and answer the questions before our lab face-to-face meetings.
Came really close to adopting that at College of Southern Nevada, and one of the sticking points for the committee, because I have the adjuncts on the textbook selection committee as well, they were concerned that if students didn't have the consistent access to technology, could they print a PDF of the book? So that was one of my pre-webinar comments, was it would be important to have a PDF printable version for students who don't have consistent technology access, because we assume that students do, but you know, they work, they need to take something with them that's electronic sometimes. So
and I would agree, that's one of the things I don't like about that book. And I use an OER for general biology. An option, it's the OpenStax, and they can't get a textbook, and half the students still want to have a printed textbook. So having that as an option is really nice.
I think they've said that team has said that they're working on a PDF version. Obviously, you can't put all the interactives in a PDF version. So, you know, I think the Library of Virginia wants us to do that as well. It might be one of those things where you have your paper version, but then you have the full version online with whatever else you're doing. So I've heard you say that you like the interactive questions, even though they aren't recorded there. You're able to transfer them into Canvas or whatever the learning management system is that you all might be using. So I guess the next question would be,
just real quick, Melissa chimed in on the accessibility issue, because again, about only 50% of her students have internet access at home. And so the inclusivity of this text in all of the various meanings of that word are certainly on our minds. So it's useful just to have this story told again and to hear it across the country. Yes, students still have broadband issues.
Well, I know Melissa said that she's at a school computer and it doesn't have the ability to produce video or audio for her. So, yeah. So we definitely will keep that in mind, and it might be one of those things where we develop the one first and then, get it. Maybe we'll get them done at the same time. We'll have to see how that all pans out as the process goes along. Darren?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think as many formats as possible are good. So there's like Pressbooks format. and being able to download on like a Kindle or e-reader. I know like for our campus to adopt an OER, it really needs to be something that can be used in multiple formats, and that visually impaired students are able to use like a screen reader for. So I mean, I love, Chris, the open geology, but that's a hurdle for us in adoption, is that it's just a web-based platform currently.
Yes, things like alt text and so forth for images. That's also stuff we're considering. On the diversity question, and the accessibility question is very near and dear to all of our hearts. I know Callan's very interested in that as also. But the question of diversity, exemplifying the diversity within the science, also is important to us. So keeping in mind certain demographics and things of that nature when we use images is also pretty critical. All right, well, when you think about like an online text specifically, we're all familiar with paper text, but we think about online text, the kinds of interactive things that you think would really capture students' attention. What might be some of the examples of those?
First and foremost, video. Students love video. That's how they do most of their learning. That's one of the things I like so much about the Salt Lake book. They've got a lot of good embedded videos.
Okay.
So, question about videos in general. Are you thinking about, again, certainly we can link to current content that's there. I mean, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel if there's quality material to be used. But are you thinking of videos that are generally explaining a concept, or perhaps animating a process, or a little bit of everything? Do you want it to be us on site somewhere, or are we looking at maybe a computer generated animation? Kind of what types of videos are interesting?
Animations are really helpful for visualizing processes that we don't actually get to see. So I definitely put a priority on animations. Past that, short, 4 to 5 minutes probably is about as long as we normally want them. Kind of all of the above in terms of what you said, but I would say animations I feel like are the hardest to find good ones of. It's pretty easy to find somebody explaining something well. It's much harder to find someone who's gone to the trouble to create an animation.
Gotcha.
It is a unique skill set. I know somebody who does that full time, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work. Well, how about other kinds of interactives you might be familiar with besides video?
Yeah, Google Earth, links to cool places. If you're referring to a certain site, if you can have a KMZ that would take students there, that would be really cool.
Yeah, Google Earth would be fantastic. Yeah, I use that a lot.
Okay. So would you want these interactives, like if you're taking them to Google Earth, is it just a show and tell, or do you want them to actually try to engage a little bit if possible? Again, I think that some of that might be a challenge depending on, how savvy they are with Google Earth and being able to do rotations and manipulate the video. But what are you kind of thinking about in terms of sending them somewhere in Google Earth?
I mean, I think the explorability is what makes it so amazing. If we just want to do show and tell, you can just put up a photo. So yeah, I think designing a really good virtual field experience with Google Earth takes a lot of work, and I'm sure that's outside of the scope of this, but maybe like the first level would be find the unconformity, in a place with a really big obvious one.
Like Gubbio.
Yeah, something like that, where there's a little bit of like they got to poke around and look, and then yeah.
Well, yeah. So we've got if you know Callan, he's not here, of course. But if you know Callan Bentley, he's done a lot of work with GigaPan imagery and 3D models, and so some of our inspiration for some of the interactives were things like stuff you'd find at gigapan.com or Sketchfab. He's not the only person creating those, but.
Does everyone know what gigapans are? Okay. Russ, do you want to?
Yeah, so a gigapan image is you take a camera, you stick it on this cool robot, and it takes a series of pictures sort of as the ox plows, referring to linear A script from my classics days. But and then it stitches those images together, and you get a gigapixel image, and you can zoom in really, really close on those things. And I think I could probably do a screen share of one if I'm really, really fancy here. But yeah, Karen.
Yeah, so the point of it is that we were thinking that if we have these beautiful gigapan images of an outcrop, you can start out with your macro view and say, okay, can we see finding upward sequence, worsening upward sequence? Then let's zoom in on a bed. Can you see sedimentary structures? Can you see fossils that will help you interpret that series of facies? Does that sound appealing?
That sounds amazing.
Okay. So, the other thing that is a question, Melissa kind of started to bring this up. She likes questions and answers that require students to click on something to proceed. And so it's that idea they have to sort of interact with an image, or they have to choose an answer and then they get immediate feedback. So are those immediate feedback type of questions useful for you?
One of the things the Salt Lake OER has is they can click on it to get the right answer or wrong answer, and then they can move on. So, well, I like that. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
All right, I'm still pulling up a cool gigapan here.
So one other question. So again, Kelly, you kind of gave us a solution of sorts. How valuable would it be to have those embedded quizzes that allow you to have graded feedback?
That would go straight into the learning management system?
Yeah.
That would save me a ton of time, yeah.
Okay, so that's something that's...
yeah, that would be great. The OER I use for biology has their own questions and their own little system. It can go into Canvas, I think, but it wasn't working.
No,
but their
gotcha.
questions were horrible, and so
or
I ended up explaining.
Would it be helpful even if it just produced as like a CSV file or some sort of Excel readable file?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I think I save that extra 20 minutes a day.
So this is a gigapan I made of an old iron furnace here, actually really close to where Callan lives, called Elizabeth Furnace, and it's cool because it's a little pen for scale. But you can really get in. You can really see a lot of detail if I zoom in here. And this one's not even as good as some of them. But the idea being that you can go and look at an outcrop really, really close, like almost like you're there. You just can't reach out and touch it, so to speak. So this is an example of the kind of thing, or an example of one of the interactives we could produce. I already actually have hundreds of them out there we can use.
Yeah, the images are there. We just have to actually create the sort of questioning around them.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Melissa's commenting, immediate feedback is most useful for students, and anything that makes less work for grading is great.
That's for sure. Actually,
Yeah.
The more of us that can produce things, and like, I don't know how many of you, are you all using Canvas or by chance?
Sadly, we're on Blackboard.
Oh,
Yeah, we're on Moodle, but similar.
yeah.
Melissa's on Blackboard as well.
Okay. Gotcha.
So it's still variable out there.
Yeah. Canvas has this commons area that's a great place for us to all share stuff. Blackboard doesn't have it, and I'm pretty sure Moodle doesn't either. So, okay. So other ideas for format that would be useful, that would make the text at least as useful and as accessible as possible for your students.
I think you know, some sort of glossary, maybe interactive glossary, is super helpful for, you know, any sort of intro geo class.
Okay.
Maybe some problem sets with solutions so that students can see a potential answer to a question without having to get the answer from me. That would be awesome.
So when you say problem sets, are you talking about just mathematical, or are you thinking about working up a cross section or drawing up a strat column, doing a correlation?
Anything you might put in a homework exercise is what I'm thinking
Okay.
of, because the biggest problem I have is getting them to trust their own problem solving skills, and finding out that there's more than one way to answer a question and still have the correct solution. So to get in the habit of being asked questions, developing answers, and then comparing them to somebody else's answer, I think is a good exercise in critical thinking. So.
Okay. Melissa says more images with processes, text that directly discusses the image, less text overall. I think that's definitely something we're trying to mimic from the Salt Lake text, is the sort of more sparse language that they use, a very directly written text, a very simple sentence structure. I think it makes it, what text there is, more readable. And that's a key for, particularly, I think, to your college students.
It's disappointing when you love to craft beautifully complex sentences, but
Not to the students, it's not disappointing if you don't have those. I don't know if you're all familiar with the software that they sometimes use in developmental education to test readability of textbooks. But you can submit portions of a textbook and it will give you a grade level at which students are required to have developed that reading skill. In geology textbooks, we're always like at 22nd grade level because of the terminology. Physics textbooks were at 8th grade level because, of course, what are we talking about with physics? We're talking about things like gravity, things move up, down, back, and forth. You know, you're not talking about these more difficult concepts and more detailed terminology that has a basis in 5 different languages like geology. So simplifying the text would be really great. That's a problem I have with the Stanley book every year, is that students tell me it's just really dense and unreadable.
Yeah.
And I have to tell them to treat it as a reference.
Yeah.
They've got plenty of reference material on the web. So, you know, I feel like it's a waste of their money to have to wade through that.
understood.
Yeah, I agree. I inherited the geology course, the historical course that I'm teaching right now, and it uses Stanley. And yeah, it's just unreadable for the students. So yeah, I agree there, definitely. Well, one of the things that we were talking about is also on this format is going through what a geologist sees, those types of interactives, you know, looking at a photo and then, you know, a second photo that's marked up with what a geologist, how a geologist looks at it. So those are things we were definitely thinking about including as well.
Yeah, how to speak rock is kind of a phrase that we've bantered around a little bit. Or you know, skills like geological drawing. I know that's something that Callan's really into. I'm not as much of an artist as he is, but you know, because of course drawing and observing, those two things together certainly do have a lot of value in how you look at an outcrop and how you interpret it. So these are things that we could encourage through the textbook, and that would be relatively easy assignments to replicate. Here's an outcrop. Now have your students draw it, you know, or you draw the outcrop, and then you could choose to have them turn in a sketch with it's annotated and to scale and all of that.
I wonder, could that be integrated into the automated feedback? So they see a photograph of an outcrop, they make a sketch of it, somehow they submit that sketch, and then they see what the geologist sees.
Oh, interesting. So they wouldn't necessarily have comments on their sketch, but it would
Right.
fit back to them like this was done by a geoscientist.
Yeah. So it would be, they would have to self-assess there, but I think that's fine.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to what Cindy was talking about with as a problem set in a sense, but they're sketching the outcrop, and then they are comparing to the of geologist's interpretation of the outcrop. So that's interesting.
Do that if you're using gigapan imagery, you could do that at different scales of observation as well.
Exactly.
So that they can look at the interpreted view of the landscape, look at the interpretive view of the outcrop, the interpretive view of the hand specimen. You know, that then they would see that micro, also macro observation level, which is a good thing for them to learn.
All right, we're getting close to 4 o'clock here, our noon, right? No, yeah, noon.
One.
Depends on your perspective.
I told you, it's that time of the semester, I can't do basic things anymore. Basically, I would say, just going through each one of our participants here, is there any sort of one thing that you want us to know, one thing you want us to, that you would love to see, like, you know, in a perfect world, perfect text, I would love to see this. Let us know.
Yeah, I'll shoot away there. So kind of building off what you've been saying with the interactive things, to me, the most critical skills are reading the rocks, as you guys have been saying, but specifically with reference to depositional environments and relative dating. Like, to me, that's the fundamental skill that we use to build our interpretations of Earth history. And the more practice problems, the more photos, the more annotations that we can see for how to read a depositional environment and sedimentary rock, and how to do reconstructed geologic histories via relative dating, that would be incredible.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind seeing inclusion of the IUGS timescale, the International Union of Geological Scientists, because they update it now several times a year, and students need to understand why it's a living document and not just something that's in every book, you know, carved in stone, literally. And it helps them when they're studying radiometric dating to see that those dates change and new stratotype sections are added. And of course, that's because I studied stratigraphy, so it's you know, it's a little near and dear to my heart. But also, it helps them remember that scientists from around the world contribute to that, and understanding Earth's history is a global science.
I think people get tired of hearing me get excited about the same thing there, Cindy. Is I get really excited about that particular time scale. I think each one of those boundaries, I mean, what is a boundary on the geologic time scale? Who decides these things, right? It's a moment in time, and every one of them has a story to it. Some are more interesting than others. I mean, just last summer, the Meghalian age, right? But like, how many people are even aware of that? We just added to the time scale. Whether you agree with it or not, there's an interesting question. The question of the Anthropocene, another interesting discussion going on, and it really is actually going on with a working group. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on with the time scale just right here in real time. So yeah, we're definitely thinking about that.
Well,
So Melissa brought up an interesting point about using metamorphism as a tool to understand tectonic events. I think that generally historical does have an emphasis on said rocks just because, and that's where you're going to get all your fossils. But I think that that's an interesting point, particularly when you start to think about orogenic events. Metamorphism has a really interesting application there. So it might be a way to make metamorphism come more alive for students if they see why we care about these transitioning phases of minerals.
Igneous geochemistry as well. Kelly, you were getting ready to say something?
Yeah, just that it would be really nice to see it kind of interwoven through the idea that science changes as we figure out new things, and that we're always willing to change our minds and all of that we all know, but that students tend to think of science as black and white. And having that be able to be understood in a textbook would be really cool. And bringing the stuff you're talking about with the time scale and all of that fits in that idea as well. So
Yeah. I know. So go ahead, Darren.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think just keeping in mind like scaffolding, if the book starts out with some reviews of physical geology or different dating techniques, being able to, those are kind of, I see those as kind of like the practical skills, and then being able to apply those in the case studies, so not just see relative dating and chapter 1, but continue to see it throughout. Same thing with radiometric dating, tectonics, metamorphic fabrics, whatever it may be. Just continuing to practice those skills, I think, would be awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's see. Melissa said, let's see here. Oh, she's saying much more limestone or carbonates in the Gigapan and 3D model collection. Who doesn't love a grainstone or a pack? That was you, Cindy. Yeah, we're not sure how deep we'll get into limestone classification or things like that, but some of us nerd out on that stuff. But let's see here. Melissa says, always tell students that historical geology is the application of concepts they learned in physical geology with evolution.
So that actually presents a challenge because that's assuming that it's being taught in a sequence.
Yeah.
Right.
And unfortunately, I would love it if I could require that, but then I wouldn't have anyone signing up for it.
Yeah.
Well, to piggyback off of what both you and Darren had said, I mean, if we house this book, at least in some version at opengeology.org, we'll be able to use material directly from the physical text as some of that background. And that will help out a lot. And especially once they produce a PDF printable copy of their text, then, that it may become like, we're hoping to become the two go-to texts for these, if nothing else.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One thing worth noting about that Open Geology one right now, you actually can print out PDFs. It's just, basically you print the page as a PDF. It's a little clunky, but that's what I've been doing when students ask for that. So it is possible.
Yeah. Well, final thoughts, folks. We want to be respectful of your time. So any other final thoughts?
I'm just really glad you're doing this. It's great.
Woohoo!
Yeah, thanks for taking this. This is a great.
If you build it, we will come.
Yes. Yes.
Well, great. Thank you very much for all of your time and for kind of for showing up here and contributing. And if anybody's interested in keeping in touch and in making contributions or suggestions or seeing things, let us know. Send us an email, send us a message, and we'll keep you in the loop. But we hope to have this ready to be. Well, we hope a full version of some kind is ready for spring. That's our stated goal.
Full version.
The Slick folks told us that's what they call themselves, the Slick. At the Salt Lake folks told us it took them 3 years. So now it seems like a bit of a miracle to get it done by spring, but we're gonna try. So
thank you so much.
Yeah. Great. Well, you all have a great afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Karen, Shelley, you want to hang out a bit too?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's just us.
Yay. Wow, that was really different.
Yeah. That was hard to pull conversation out.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because I feel like this was more typical of conversations I've had with two-year college instructors in general.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there's also just a very different sense of who we teach and how we teach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 2-year college experience, I've only dabbled in the world a little bit. I only had 5 years at Lord Fairfax, doing it on the side, and so my experience is limited to that. But the 2-year college experience seems so variable from across the country, even within Virginia. But wow.
Yeah. Just Melissa's comments, especially, number one, she's on the, on the webinar here without a video, without audio. And what she said, something like 50% of her students don't have access to the internet or, computer at home. That's just astounding, really. And, we've got to somehow be cognizant of that. And I don't know how, since this is an online textbook, I don't know how you compensate for that.
Right. I think that, again, obviously we can't, this is the thing that I feel like we constantly go back to in all of these big discussions, is like, it's hard to be everything to all people.
Yeah, we can't. And I'm not saying we can't be the book that she would use either. But on some level, the state of New York appears to need to get its act together.
I would not have thought Syracuse. She was in Syracuse, right?
Yeah,
that just blew me away.
It's a post-industrial city. Like a lot of it, like Youngstown or others, but maybe it hasn't recovered yet, like Cleveland or, and that'll take some time, perhaps. But I would like to think, and I may be wrong, that situation is unusual, but I don't know. I really don't know.
No, I know for a fact that out in the rural part of Virginia, if you think kind of out underneath West Virginia, they have very limited access.
Yeah.
And I was at a talk at New Horizons, not like 2 years ago, maybe, where I remember them talking, it was an OER thing, and they were talking about how rural parts of the state still have that major challenge of being able to use these as the typical text for their students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one thing for students not to have access, but then like to be at a college like that and not have that access. And that's kind of what I totally get the student thing. I'm in a rural area myself, and I have a student who's going off to a freshman year at Harvard next year, and he's never had internet at home. Which is kind of
wow.
Culture shock.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting for him. Let's see, what other thoughts? I don't have as much time to talk at the moment this time, but it is worth doing this. So
I think the big thing that I took away, again, is like the interactives are a big part of what's going to sell this to people.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a want. And so like the visualizations were a big thing yesterday.
Right.
So I think that's where we should try to focus some of our time and attention this summer if we can, I think. I think that the physical aspects of historical geology, sedimentary rocks, sedimentary facies, the dating, that's pretty much covered in the slick text. Mm-hmm. What we need is a lot of the paleo content or the bio content, and then the visualizations piece and the resources piece is what I feel like I'm hearing we should focus our attentions on. Because I think that realistically having some sort of final testable text for spring.
Yeah. Well, that was what prompted that last email that I that I had, was about just the reality of the time factor. And there is there's I didn't didn't mean to offend anyone,
You didn't.
But I just felt like we can't spend all this time, like, Kellen rewriting the whole thing on, absolute and relative dating when it's there,
And this is where I feel Callan's expertise and vision on the
visualizations,
is probably where it might be useful for him to spend more of his energies. Mm-hmm. And Russ and I really work on knocking out this paleo-bio text material. And then, Michelle, you continue to keep finding the resources that can support this.
Well, one area I do think that we need to work on and develop more than the slick text does is how do we use metamorphic rocks to understand the Earth's past, and how do we use igneous rocks to understand the Earth's past?
That's you, Shelley. That ain't me.
That's a Shelley and Callan thing. So,
yeah, and that was a really good comment, because we don't see that very often. And the other thing that relative to sedimentary environments that was brought up here was that I was thinking about was, a lot of textual material is there on current depositional environments, but you don't see a lot of, this is the depositional environment, but here's what it looks like in the rock record, and really, just focus on that, like, yep, that's a depositional environment, because every place you look, it shows you modern depositional environments,
or
it doesn't
a drawing.
A drawing, but it doesn't take you right to the location. Here's what we see in the rocks, and I think that would be a really good.
Take one of those models of a nearshore environment with all the facies, and then you could go and link to GigaPans. You click on the little button over here where it says super title, and boom, you go in there and bam, there it is. There's the rock.
And something like marching through that tumbling run exposure would be really valuable with that.
What would be really cool too is to start with the whole, uniformitarianism. We've got these environments that exist today. They likely exist in the past. Earth link, go zoom in, check out this environment. Now we're going to go back in time. Back in time, here are these same environments in the rock. And here's that help us determine that. So you are still getting that modern link and the picture of a modern environment, but then you're actually very clearly showing that relationship to the rock.
And then the circular aspect, or maybe this is scaffolding, when you present that as uniformitarianism, and then you go back in the section on depositional environments and maybe have a second example of that,
Well, and we can't illustrate every location in the world.
No.
We certainly can illustrate locations like, Sauk sequence or whatever locations in Virginia, like Tumbling Run or Sauk or Tippecanoe. And then we could also look at something similar, or not necessarily concurrent in time, but maybe something more related to San Francisco Bay, which I know Callan's been doing a lot of stuff with. And then you get a little bit of east-west coast on a craton, at least, and some of that history. I don't know how localized we want to get, but we have to have examples. I mean, examples are key, and they're going to have to come from somewhere. So they may as well come from the collections that already exist. I know Callan will get excited about writing up stuff about all that stuff. So, Callan, we know you will. Hopefully that's some inspiration for you in the midst of everything else going on. Okay, well, other final thoughts?
So do we want to have a conversation next week at all? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, it might be worth touching base maybe on Wednesday noon.
Yeah, I think I've put these on my calendar now, every Wednesday at noon.
I think Wednesday noon is fine. I think that's when, I don't know if you guys saw, but I put my notes from yesterday's.
Yeah, I just saw that this morning, and I'm going to annotate your notes with my notes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do the same thing today.
Okay.
Perhaps we can point Callan to this so he can look these over. He can listen to the recordings if he chooses. I think the thing is, I believe we had some writing assignments or things that we were kind of working on. I was going to be working on some of the sedimentary facies descriptions, I think is what I was getting at. Or I was going to try to practice using some of the slick text and basically, take that and then tweak it, add to it, etc.
Karen, I was thinking about the evolutionary faunus question versus individual groups, and I I'm still trying to debate how best we should handle that. I think handling them as a group, as a group of faunas and different chunks of fauna is probably the best way of handling it, rather than getting into like, these are brachiopods, these are echinoderms, these are crinoids, that's what I'm hearing from people, that getting into the specifics of individual fossil groups is less important than. So let's let that lie fallow for a bit and work on these other sections. But let's come back and talk about that some more in another week or two.
Yeah, and maybe what I can do is start drafting up kind of a model of, like, I can go through the Cambrian fauna and just, or kind of do an introduction into that, just so you can kind of see what I'm thinking.
Right, because I've seen a couple different versions of that. You've got the Sepkoski's 3, and then you've got people adding other ones, Vendian, pre-Vendian, or I guess.
Right.
So there's, and then there's nothing in there about terrestrial stuff, let alone fish, really, or that whole progression from fish onto us.
Right.
So maybe I might be better on the moment stopping, and maybe I'll focus on a little section on the column and like boundaries, GSSP, that kind of thing, to get it off my chest, and then move into stratigraphy, and just I can mention sequence stratigraphy, but I won't get into the details of that. But transgressive, regressive,
that's it.
Walther's law, that kind of stuff.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think even getting into like the basics of like TST.
No.
Too much.
No. But this idea that I might mention that there are, I don't know, I might go so far as to say there's different orders of cycles based on different environmental changes.
That I think is fine.
That we think are based on. So
I think that's an important thing to emphasize. Just students have this like sea level rises, sea level falls. That's like
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We don't need to get all the little terminology that gets into by any means. So maybe I'll focus my efforts there at the moment, and we can come back and revisit the fossils. Shelley, what are you toying with?
Well, one thing I was thinking about is, going back to the comments from the SLIC folks is, and we had talked about this as well, is after these webinars, do we have and we have this Zoom capability now where we can stay on for a long period of time. Do we, the four of us, want to sit down and try and knock out a table of contents in great detail, like the SLIC people said that they did, using their model of a table of contents relative to my thoughts are, what do we take from them? What do we have to write ourselves? What do we have to look for?
Mm-hmm.
Not trying our very best not to reinvent the wheel, and just,
I had a thought about a format for the table of contents. You can tell me if I'm crazy or not, but I had this view, because I know we don't want to do the March Through Time, but talking to my wife, he took a class in called The History of Life from my undergraduate advisor, Mark Wilson, years ago. And, he did, at the time, it was a March Through Life sort of thing, but, the time scale is what it is. What if the table of contents were the time scale? All right. And we could still have your usual sort of things, maybe with a little links about first plants, whatever. But like, then our big chapters would be the Great Oxygenation Event and its systems implications, and the rather than having a traditional table of contents, it's just like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3.
mm-hmm.
It becomes this sort of thing where every time they go to it, they're looking at the time scale and internalizing it on some level. So we kind of implicitly, there's a march through time, but we don't talk about the march through time. It just gets absorbed, hypothetically.
I guess my thought is then where do we hang faces?
Right.
Yeah.
The background. Yeah.
We have to tackle that, but I don't. Yeah.
I do like that for like, I think we have kind of like, again, let's build your tools, your skill set. Here's your toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
Let's toolbox. Now let's go look at the rocks. So about reading the rocks. Well, first we have to learn how to read. So we have that section.
Yep.
And then we have our, okay, now let's practice, and we'll go the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where I think having us block out even something like 4 hours and just, start really focusing on the table of contents in great detail, so we know, you know, we know what our assignments are, you know, and we have the discussions at those times, you know, in a big focus concentrated block of time about using metamorphism as, you know, talking about orogenic episodes. You know, so we have those conversations. It seems to me we're splintering, you know, and because I think we don't have an outline, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, so I think an outline, you know, really detailed outline would help us, you know, point to where are we taking this material from, where do we need to annotate material we're taking, and where do we have to write.
And it's just easier for us to see at a glance too, what's done,
Right.
what needs to be done.
Right.
Yeah.
So
well, let's meet on Wednesday, and then
Okay.
We'll see if Callan's able to meet with us.
yeah,
I think we need to set that date and time with him and
right. Sure, absolutely.
consultation, of course. But Karen, did you have something? I see your hand.
I just remembered, Callan was supposed to be going to, what is it? It's the South or Eastern NAGT meeting.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
I've got a workshop there on 7th as well.
So it's the 7th?
Well, the 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Okay. I just wanted to know time frame of that because, again, I don't know where he's going to be in terms of preparation for that given what he's dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I also feel like we need to really start to get a handle on this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, if we want to have an extended period of time, we're going to have to talk to Eric, is it, about using
Yes.
this? And so we could certainly do that for Wednesday. Maybe we could sketch out something rough that we could share with him. I know he's working on his stuff. I've got a workshop I'm doing for that on that Friday as well that I haven't started working on yet. So I know maybe it's one of those things where on some level that particular 4-hour meeting with Callan may have to wait until after that meeting. I don't know how
It was it there where he, I'm sorry, was it there where he was going to have another workshop? No, it was.
That was at the rendezvous in July.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. We've already started sort of outlines in places, right?
Mhm.
Shelley, would it be possible for you in the next, for our discussion next Wednesday, to start a spreadsheet? And in that spreadsheet, we're doing, chapter 1 or like topic 1, dating. And then, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and just list out all of the topics that you think should be in there or what we've already kind of started to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps the other 3 of us can go in there and add our thoughts as we go so that we sit down to have a discussion next Wednesday. We already have a document to work from.
Okay, so let me take a stab at starting a table of contents of sorts.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. And then I was also, I'll get in touch with Callan and see, because he wanted to kind of rewrite his absolute dating or, numerical dating. And perhaps if he's not available to do that, I can look at, go through what he did and just try and pull in what's already there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that what I've found so far is that, again, if we have something to start with, if the 4 of us try to come together to create something,
Mm-hmm.
the 4 voices we're trying to unite, and it's just a challenge. Mm-hmm. But if we start with a working document, I think it's much easier for us to jump in and add our ideas.
Right. Okay. So that'll be my focus. And then add things where I know that there are materials out there already that we could evaluate. But I'll knock off my version, what's going around in my head of a table of contents.
Well, that chapter might be, gosh, I could see that chapter being basic geologic time stuff, which includes dating. I could see another chapter being paleobiology.
Oh, yeah,
That
yeah.
would be a lot of the stuff where Karen, you and I are writing right now.
Right.
Chapter might
Like
be,
I said, we've already got this in like 5 places, I feel like. So.
Yeah.
well, and then we have our toolbox chapter, and then we get into our case studies or something. You know, I mean, there's lots of different ways of doing it, but you know.
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
take a stab for
Okay, great.
Wednesday. Yep.
Cool.
All right. Well, I'm going to record. I'm going to download this. I have to download it, and then I get to upload it. Have you tried the other link yet to see whether it worked for you, ladies?
I have not.
Okay. It's on my account, but I think I've got all the permissions correct. So.
Okay.
Okay.
right.
Okay.
All right. I will. We'll see you guys next Wednesday then.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
One quick question to you,
Oh,
Shelley.
yep.
Transfer VA stuff.
Oh, right. Yeah. I got to look at that.
Okay. So just shoot me an email.
Okay. Okay.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, ladies.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.